Welcome to the Vision Gap Show. Align your big idea and vision with a plan of action to resonate and stand out in your market. With your hosts, Andy Halko and Tony Zayas.
Hello and welcome everyone to today's episode. We're going to dive in and take a look at go-to-market strategy and basically address some of the challenges with building out a go-to-market strategy, which is that there's a lot of pieces and parts that you have to pull together and consider. And so we're going to talk about how we approach this using Frictionless, but how you can approach it otherwise as well. So Andy, go-to-market strategy, there's a lot to it. How did you, as you built out Frictionless, what was your thought process and how to address that complexity?
Yeah, I think when you go back to it, and again, I've been doing go-to-market strategy consulting probably for 15 plus years, is that it's a sum of many different parts, and it depends what you're trying to solve in a go-to-market strategy. You're trying to figure out, how do we go to market? How do we compete better? How do we capture market share? And there are all of these different pieces. And we've talked in past shows about target audience. Obviously, understanding who you want to reach is one of those pieces. Who you are as a company is a piece. When we looked at that, graphic, the model of go-to-market. And I think one of the important things for people to always understand is that a lot of this comes down to having the right progression too. You're trying to solve a problem. You're saying, we really need to better articulate our differentiation, or we need to, be able to have better messaging in our marketing, these things that are more tangible that are part of it. But if you haven't filled in the gaps in different places and you haven't gone through a progressive approach, it can get hard to achieve or solve that specific thing that you're looking to do. And so for us with Frictionless, it really is a progression. And I think that's one of the things that building it in a platform is helping folks do, is understand all the pieces and parts and almost give them a roadmap of how to go through it. And it's really why it's structured the way it is. You see here in the screen that we've got target audiences, competitors, vision, offerings, differentiation, positioning. That's a purposeful order to it, because you have to understand who you're targeting. You then have to understand what's the market look like. Then you can come in and say, okay, who are we as an organization and what's our vision, mission, and goals? Then what are we offering and how do we detail out the specifics of what we're going to deliver? And then we can start moving into, okay, how are we different, right? And so I think that it's important for folks to understand that progression and this process of moving through different steps, because you can't really get differentiation. You can't really get positioning if you haven't properly done target audiences, competitors, offerings, culture, some of these other pieces, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And before you dove in, I was going to ask, where's the best starting point? There's a lot of things to dive into, but I agree with you that it's understanding, target audience, competitive landscape, because if you first, it's that comparison amongst, the competitive landscape, where do you fit and how are you meeting your target audience's needs? That's where you come up with differentiation mixed in with all the other things, vision, offering, et cetera. So yeah, it's powerful stuff. But a lot.
Blindly somewhere, the first thing you're going to do is look around and figure out, where am I currently? And, what's the landscape look like? What's the temperature so that I can know what I need to survive, right? It's one of those things that you're not going to start solving problems. You're not going to start building a shelter. You're not going to start hunting. You're not going to do any of that stuff, because the first thing your brain is going to do is understand, where you're at and what that means and how that might change how you have to hunt or how you have to build. If it's a frozen landscape, the first thing you have to do is figure out making sure you get warm, and understanding the type of hunting that you can do in that type of area versus if you're dropped off in a desert. And I think, business is like that in some ways, right? And I think a lot of times people start on the other side, which is understandable. They see a problem in the market and they come in and they say, okay, I have this offering, I'm going to sell it. And I don't think they pay enough attention to their environment.
Yeah.
And what's around. And that makes it hard to solve problems, makes it hard to make plans. You can't hunt, you can't do all these things that you need to do to survive and thrive because you haven't taken the time to really understand your environment, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I was going to say, you got to know, if you're given a map, you got to know where you're at on that map for it to be useful. And then you could see your surroundings and what you're dealing with. So same type of concept there.
And then I think within each of these, we talk about steps, is that it is then progressive steps inside that. And I think that's a little bit gets to the next level of problem solving. One of the things I did early on in consulting was say, okay, we need to figure something out. What are the steps that we need to take to get there? There has to be a logic to it. And again, I think a lot of folks, especially for years doing it on their own, they sit in a room with a blank piece of paper and they try and solve a problem. It's like, but you don't know what the equation is.
Yeah.
And I think that what we've really tried to do in the consulting and now replicated in Frictionless as a platform is give that formula, help them understand that there are steps, and they don't have to start with a blank piece of paper and they can follow the formula, right?
Yeah. And if you're not doing that, you're looking at it as if it's art. And if you're working with a consultant that's telling you it's art, that's a lie, because yes, there's some art, there's some science, but there's got to be a balance there. The art is where it's a blank canvas and, I'm just going to put something together and it's going to be powerful. But the logic side of it is breaking it down, comparing, prioritizing, organizing, doing all those things. And as you said, you work through and built out a number of exercises and process to do that. So it's not a big guessing game. It's working through the steps, finding what you need and putting it together. So it, like you said, it becomes more of the equation, which I think is reassuring to know that there is an equation and it can be broken down into bite-sized pieces. That makes it seem more manageable and something that's easier to accomplish a really good GTM.
Well, and I think, in the past, folks work with different consultants and there's some great ones out there that have built formulas or they follow formulas that exist. There are others, that do it the same way that someone does that doesn't have the knowledge. And, what they do is they go ask a bunch of questions. They go back and they have their own white sheet of paper where they're trying to figure it out. And, unfortunately, folks don't know that, right? And they're getting a process that's still guessing. I think one of the great things with a platform like Frictionless is being able to expose some of the formula in the process because you have to go through it. You don't have a choice, right? And then I know the next piece we were going to talk about a little bit was the whole idea that in general for us, we've incorporated AI significantly into our platform. And one of the core concepts that we've learned is that AI is significantly more effective when you break it up into small steps. So instead of trying to, do one thing very quickly and say like, solve my problem, again, almost the white sheet of paper, you're giving ChatGPT this open-ended thing. When you do that, if you go in and say, I'm a, dog groomer, tell me why I'm different, obviously it's going to be very generic. It's just going to grab some things, right? But if you follow the formula that we have in the steps of figuring out how to become different, which is understanding why people buy, then understanding what your competitors are good at, and then finding some of the difference between, those pieces, and then going through certain questions. You can train the AI on the formula, and then it can produce an outcome that isn't guesswork. It's actual logic, and it's valuable, and it's strategic, and I think that's the difference in my world. I always think about the word strategy means different things to different people. To me, strategy is about a plan that comes from logic versus an idea, a plan that comes from just ideas, right?
Yeah.
And I that's the thing that I try and get to for folks. And I think when you're using AI, that's an important piece, is that you have to have logic, or you're not really getting strategy. Because to me, when people say strategy and it's based off of just ideas, that's not strategy. That's some other word, right? And I'm just a big believer that you don't actually have a real strategy unless you have a formula and logic behind it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that kind of demystifies some of the things that people looking to do this type of thing, diving in, using AI, need to hear. So some important words of wisdom there. And I do want to mention this slide in particular comes from a webinar that you've delivered a few times that we've had incredible turnout for it and really good feedback. So we're actually doing another one. It's going to be on Wednesday, the 16th of October. If you go to Insivia.com, up in the top navigation, it's featured there. So you can go to the page and register. I encourage you to check it out, because Andy's been doing a really good job of distilling this stuff down and really, I think, making sense of how to use AI effectively, getting rid of all there's so much around it. It could be a little overwhelming. I think you're good at breaking it down and really getting people to understand how they could use it in a practical, actionable way. So, and I think this is a good example of that. If you haven't checked it out already, frictionlesshq.com, if you guys want to try the platform out. But anything else you have for today, Andy?
No.
Awesome. Well, hope to see some of you guys on the next webinar, and we will see you on our next show next week. Take care, everybody.
All right.
This episode of the Vision Gap Show has been brought to you by Frictionless. Build high-impact strategy at scale. Create your vision, brand position, and go-to-market strategy, all in a collaborative AI-enabled workspace. Visit frictionlesshq.com to create your free account today.